This morning we're going to be covering a rather difficult subject. It's an uncomfortable subject, but it's one that needs to be covered every now and then. And it is one that is most serious. We're going to go to Romans chapter 1 and we're going to read a few things there. Now, if I were to cover, if we were to have a lesson on the Nazis' slaughter of millions of people, there wouldn't be a whole lot of objection to that sermon. How they were wrong, and how justice should have been done, and how that needed to be stopped. That of millions of people being slaughtered by Nazi Germany and their allies. And that would be an easy sermon to preach, and also one that most people, and I do mean most people, would accept. But what if we talk about millions of people who are being slaughtered, and they're being slaughtered in this country, and they're being slaughtered around the world, and they're being slaughtered by their own mothers? Should that not be addressed? And it should. Let's go to Romans chapter 1, and we just want to read beginning in verse 28. Romans 1 and verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. Now we can take that word not fitting and minimize that and say that that's not fitting and being like a minor thing. That's just not fitting. This is the better thing to do. When the Greek words in this not fitting, it means not good. It means something that is in fact wicked. And a debased mind is one that refuses wisdom, is one that goes right after wickedness. It is a heart that desires what is wicked and will do whatever it takes for that wickedness. Whatever it takes. Now, a debased mind is one that is a murky mind. Now, perfectly rational, perfectly reasonable when wanting to be, but when it comes to moral subjects, when it comes to wisdom or foolishness, that one will always choose the wrong. And we can spend a lot of time just talking about that. But verse 29, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. There's nothing positive in this description. There's nothing positive. This is Paul writing about the world the way it was then. He was talking about the Gentile world specifically, why it had the problems that it had. And there were people in that day that, yes, they were haters of God. They were violent. They were proud. They were all of these things. Undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving. Having no natural love whatsoever. What would just come natural has been killed in them. And that is what we want to be addressing this morning. And it is the subject of abortion, because abortion is, in fact, an abomination to God. It is listed as one of those 6 things that are an abomination to Him. Well, actually, these 6 things are hated by God. Yes, 7 are an abomination to Him. And one of those is, in fact, the shedding of innocent blood. And that's precisely what abortion does. We cannot be part of that. And I want to explain that there is no neutral ground here. There is no neutral ground. Either abortion is the taking of innocent human life, which is murder, or it's not. It either is true that it is wicked, or it would be false that it is wicked, which means that it would be perfectly fine. Now we're going to look at biblical text to show us, to help us in understanding these things, because we can know. And the fact of the matter is, there is no neutral ground. There's no neutral corner. It just exactly as Christ said, if you're not gathering with me, you're scattering abroad. Well, that's the way it is with a lot of subjects, that this is completely wrong, and that lives are lost because of this. Lives are lost. And we live in a time of extraordinary hypocrisy. Some may smooth that word off into, say, irony, but hypocrisy really is the case, that I would go to federal prison if I harmed the egg of a bald eagle. If I broke the egg of a bald eagle, if I destroyed that egg, I would go to federal prison. I don't know for how many years, but I would. But yet, it is perfectly fine to kill an unborn child, an unborn human child. That's perfectly, matter of fact, it is now called by some a right. You never get the right to murder somebody. Murder is always wrong. Going back to Genesis, we have, Genesis chapter 9, we have a statement being made that is the protection of innocent human life. And in this statement, it also is where someone can have that right to live revoked by killing a human being, by killing an innocent human being. And this is universal. It doesn't change. It doesn't change at all. Verse 6, so Genesis 9, verse 6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Now understand, that's mankind. That's all of mankind. That's men, women, children, and the unborn. That's everybody. Everybody. Name me which one in there is not made in the image of God. For as you have, well, verse 7, we don't have to go into verse 7, but just verse 6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. All right, meaning you can have that right to live, your right to live, revoked by killing another person, an innocent person. You can have that revoked. So the words is in the Exodus chapter 20 with the 10 Commandments. You shall not kill actually means you shall not murder. That under the law of Moses, there was capital punishment. So some people were killed. And they were supposed to be killed because there were certain laws that if you broke those laws, murder being one of them, if you broke those laws, you just lost your life. And that would not be murder. That would be justice. To kill the murderer is in fact justice. Now, I'm bringing this out to show the importance of human life. And that when we're talking about abortion, there is the pro-abortion stance, which says it's a human right, it's a choice, it is also a way of equalizing men and women, which is a stupid idea, especially if it's going to involve murdering the unborn. It's a progression of sexual freedom, and it also is saying that we get to decide who is human and who is not human. We get to decide. We don't get to decide that. Which is good, because who do we trust to do that? That we get to decide. We bestow personhood on whoever we want. We can bestow, yeah, you have the right to live. This other person doesn't have the right to live because we've decided they're not really a human being. Well, on what grounds did you decide they're not a human being? And you need to understand, with the acceptance of abortion, that means at least some innocent human life can be killed. Well, you just open the door to everybody. Human life has no value at that point. None at all. And you might as well take Genesis 9 and 6 and toss it out, because it would have no point whatsoever. If you get to decide who's human, that means somebody else gets to decide too. And they may decide they don't think you're human. And they can decide you're an inconvenience to me, you're trouble to me, therefore I can get rid of you. Now we come to the other side, and that is what is referred to as pro-life or anti-abortion. And that is stating that abortion is in fact murder. Abortion is the taking of innocent human life. The abortionist is a paid murderer. Human life is intrinsically valuable at every point of life, from before being born, from conception, all the way to that of very, very old age. And at certain times, that would be especially at both ends of this lifespan, we can become an inconvenience, more of an inconvenience to somebody. More of an inconvenience. Now, some would say, you're an inconvenience to me every day. You can say that, but you still cannot kill that person simply because they make your life a little difficult and require patience out of you. That realistically, we are to bear one another's burdens. We are to love each other and to love all humanity. With abortion in the picture, that is entirely destroyed. Now, there is that myth of the middle ground, and there is no middle ground. We've already said it. There's no middle ground in this. And the middle ground, as is often the case, lends its loyalty and lends its support actually to the wrong side. It always does. It always does. There is no neutral part in this. And neutrality in something like this, something that is right or wrong, proclaiming yourself neutral in this always helps the side of evil every time. Every time. Let's just go to Matthew chapter 12. Let's go to Matthew 12. And we just want to look at some words here. Matthew chapter 12 and verse 30. We made mention of it. Now we see it again. Matthew 12 verse 30. And these are the words of Christ. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters abroad. Meaning there's no neutral ground with Christ. There isn't, I'm for Christ, or I'm against Christ, or I'm neutral. There is no neutral. There he is either with him or against him. And he says the identical thing in Luke chapter 11 verse 23. Now, there is the sanctity of human life. It is clear. There is the sanctity. We've already read Genesis 9 and 6 that there is such a thing as innocent human blood being shed. Now, let's just work on that logically. Is an unborn child innocent? Yes. An unborn child has neither done good nor evil. An innocent child is absolutely, or an unborn child is absolutely innocent. Completely innocent. Now we have to ask, is that unborn child human? Well, my first inclination is let's wait and find out. If we're unsure about it, let's just wait and find out. And maybe by the time they're 18, we can ask them, are you human? All right, let's just wait and find out. But the fact of the matter is, there is no more information. There's nothing lacking for that unborn child to be human. There's nothing lacking at all. That every bit of their person, every bit of the DNA necessary, everything necessary for them to be a person is already in place. And I would tell you, even their soul. And I'm going to show you that biblically. I'm going to show you that. Even their soul is in place. It's there. They are a person. So here is this sanctity of human life, and here is also this understanding that an unborn child is innocent and human. Let's just go back to the bald eagle. Suppose I just said, well, that wasn't really a bald eagle. That was just I broke that egg, and that's just an egg. That's not a bald eagle. And the judge will say that would be hatched as a bald eagle. You destroyed a bald eagle. All right. The same logic goes to the human child. The same logic goes there. Let's go now to Jeremiah chapter 1. And we're going to look at some things. Jeremiah chapter 1. These are the words of God given to Jeremiah. And this is for us to understand that an unborn child is who they are. An unborn child is who they are. Now, one can say, well, that child is undeveloped. Well, I've got some news for you. That child will remain undeveloped until probably age 18. Fully developed. It's going to take some years. So until they become an adult, can we kill them simply because they're not developed? Well, the answer to that is no, we can't. They are protected from that first moment of conception all the way until they die of old age. They are protected all the way through. And all of us are. You destroy the value of human life. Any innocent human life, you devalue your own. We made mention of this not too long ago in our Proverbs class. And this is bringing back Nazi Germany in again, but we usually think of Nazi Germany as basically focusing on exterminating the Jews and, Russians and the Slavic people in general and gypsies and people that they saw as inconvenient, such as someone who may have a mental condition, just kill that person. Someone who has some kind of infirmity, kill that person. Someone who's not as strong as we think they ought to be, kill that person. And it escalated to where? And one would wonder how could it escalate even further, but it did, to where there was what is known as wildfire killings among the Germans of themselves. I kill you because I can. And I don't care if you are a German citizen. I don't care if you have fought bravely for the Fuhrer. I don't care if you have done these things. I kill you simply because I can. It was a plummet for them, and they saw it. It was more than a slippery slope on that one. That was just diving off the cliff. And it had to be a very heavy hand to stop it. A very heavy hand. Now, we come to Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 4. Watch this. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, that's Jeremiah. Word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. God is saying, I knew who you were. Who you were. There is a you that is there. That's a human being, and that human being is none other than Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah the prophet, before I formed you in the womb, here we have Jeremiah the prophet who's just in development. And he's got to be. He's got to develop all of his organs so that he can live outside the womb. So that he can live and live his life here. And everything has been known about him. I knew you. And this is in past tense. That obviously Jeremiah is a full-grown adult at this point, and he says, I formed you and I knew who you were. I knew who you were. Now, Jeremiah is known. God has a purpose and a plan for the life of this child. God formed him. He's not absent from the process. He is there. He knows what is developing there, and that is the body of Jeremiah. The soul of Jeremiah is there. The body of Jeremiah is developing and will, as we've already stated, will continue to develop all the way through childhood. Will continue to develop. And to have aborted this child would have been to have killed the prophet Jeremiah. It's that simple. It's that simple. There's nothing else about it. God formed him, God knew him, God sanctified him, God ordained him. And do you have the right to kill him before we even get to that? Before he's able to become a prophet to write the book of Jeremiah and to do his duty? Well, the answer is no, we don't. Let's go to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, we have several things in this chapter that we need to look at. But abortion is a serious matter. It's not something that's minor. And I'm just going to take Luke chapter 1, I'm just going to take this moment to say it used to be 100 years ago or so that this was entirely a moral question, and that religion did have a place in the debate. This was a moral question, and preachers, Christians, and even others who just happen to be religious, whatever the religion happened to be, that they had a place in the debate. But someone took a hold of this and decided, no, this is not a moral question. This is a political question, and that religion has no right treading on this ground. Religion has no right to speak out against this. This is political only, and it is a human right, but that's all a lie. It's all a lie. It's not a right. And anyone who is pushing this is against God. And I'll just say the words, is wicked. Anyone pushing this. And I think it is weak need to even say, I'm going to let others decide. I'm not going to decide, I'm going to let others decide. That's weak need. But to say that no, we are going to pursue this, and that this is an absolute right, as though it were in the Constitution, of which it is not, as though it were a thing of the Bible, which it is not. This isn't a right bestowed by God at all. It's been taken that we have the right to murder who we want to murder. And because no one can represent or will represent an unborn child cannot complain. An unborn child is left to the mercy of their mother. And we go back to that word that we read in Romans chapter 1, unloving. And that takes its price. A mother who is going to kill their own unborn child is one who has more love for something else. For convenience. It's as simple as that. Can God forgive us? Yes, He can. Let's go. So we're at Luke chapter 1, verse 13. But the angel said to him, this is to Zacharias, "Do not be afraid, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will also be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God." This is Gabriel that came to Zacharias. This is Gabriel that came to him, telling him he is going to have a son. And his son, now the son doesn't exist yet. He's still speaking prophetically. He's still speaking of something that's going to happen in the future. Near future, by the way. But he says he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. Well, how can that be if in the mother's womb he's just a soulless bit of matter? How could that be? Actually, there's a soul that is there. There is a soul, there is a spirit that is housed right there. The house is small to begin with, but then you grow to be an adult. It's got to start. You got to start small. You got to. That's the way of biology. But we're not just biology. We are made in the image of God, and we have a soul. And once again, if one innocent person can be killed, and it's okay, then every single one of us can be a target, can be the next ones. Every single one of us. It will just escalate from that point. It will escalate. Now, we go to verse 41. Same chapter, Luke 1, verse 41. And here is when Mary comes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. Mary is she's also pregnant. And she has the Christ. That's who she's carrying. Verse 41, "And it happened when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary that the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Then she spoke out with a loud voice and said, 'Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. But why is it granted to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For indeed, as soon as the voice of the greeting sounded in my ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. Blessed is she who believed, for there will be fulfillment of those things which were told her from the Lord.'" Notice that this unborn child, John, is showing emotion. Already showing emotion. Well, that's a human trait, by the way. That's a human trait. We have emotions. We have joy. We have sorrow. We can have deep grief. We can have great contentment. We are created with emotions. Trees, not so much. Rocks, not so much. Tomatoes, not so much. But we have emotions. And here is an unborn child showing that emotion because he knows, he senses that another unborn child, this being the Christ, has just come near. Knowing it. And both are going to grow up to be important. Both of them are. Now we go back to verse 30. We go back to verse 30, Luke 1 and verse 30. "Then the angel said to her," that is Gabriel to Mary, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." Now, that's a lot of things to talk about for a person that doesn't exist just yet. But as we have already read, the Christ has to be in as an unborn child before he can become an adult. Because we have the promise going all the way back to Genesis chapter 3 that there will be someone born of woman who will take care of sin. And while being unborn, in that period of time of being unborn, that still is the Christ. That's still the Christ. And as a 2-year-old, he's still the Christ. And as a 30-year-old going, now performing miracles, he is the Christ now going into fulfilling his ministry on time. Years ago, I remember, and I do mean years ago, is when I was in high school. I would hear about that we don't need to eradicate certain plants or any plant. Every plant needs to be kept. Something needs to be kept of that plant. Because potentially, what if that plant was the cure for cancer? And we destroyed it. What if we destroyed the cure for cancer and didn't even know it? We need all these plants, and they should be preserved. There should be a sense of ecology to keep these plants, because one of these plants, one day it may be discovered, that's the very thing that is the cure for pick your disease. It's a cure for something. What about preserving all the unborn, because that might be the one to discover that plant? But we killed him or her. What about that one? What about the one that's going to be that brilliant mind that makes the discovery of, yes, this is the cure for cancer. This is the cure for whatever chronic ailment, whatever terminal ailment, that this is the cure. Why aren't we protecting the humans as well as the plants? Why aren't we doing that? I'm going to tell you why. Because Satan doesn't want that. Satan doesn't care a thing about the plants. Plants here, plants not here, he doesn't care. Humanity, that's where he's got his game. That's where his own self-appointed mission is. That is where that is. Kill every pine tree in the state of Georgia, he won't care. And you've murdered nobody. But start killing children, and that he approves of. That he absolutely approves of. And kill everybody else in the process. That he absolutely approves of. Now, none of these individuals we have talked about, Jeremiah, John the Baptist, or Christ, none of them were bestowed personhood by their parents or anybody else. That was given by God. That was absolutely given by God. Someone who is infirm, someone who has some whether a chronic disease or just terribly disabled, that person is still a person. And there's something that I read years ago, and it was by a surgeon, by a doctor. And this had to do with actually euthanasia, not as much about abortion, but it was about euthanasia. And he said that if we can save some patients, and that we put every effort to save this patient, but we put no effort to save this other patient, or go and just actively kill that patient, that everything becomes sloppy. Everything becomes sloppy. That no patient really matters at all. None. Kill them or send them home. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And he's right about that. He is absolutely right about that. Someone may be an inconvenience to us, But if you have a moral obligation to that person, you keep that moral obligation, and you most certainly cannot kill that person. Maybe in the process you mature. Maybe in the process you actually have patience and a greater strength and not selfish anymore. There are those who make it a bragging point of what they have done, in fact, and think that it is some kind of great thing that they have done. And I mean that really there is a religion that is out there, and it's I would call it a godless religion, but it does have its gods. It does. And one of the rights is that of having an abortion. That's one of the rights of becoming a real feminist, having an abortion. You've shown it to the patriarchy. You have become equal, absolutely equal with men. You have shown it to everybody. You are free. You're not free at all. Not at all. You have made a catastrophe and killed your own child. That is no good. Can we have forgiveness in this? Yes, we can. Christ died for all of us. There is hope for all of us, and it's given to us. And we, just going back to Romans once again, going to Romans, and we go back to Romans chapter 1. And there in verse 31, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving. The one that's supposed to be protecting becomes the murderer. The ones who are supposed to be nurturing do not. They throw away maternal love. They throw away all that is good. The natural feelings are denied, and there is a suffering that occurs. There is a suffering, and there's also help. The help is from Christ. The help, always, Christ will help us in anything. And we just want to reiterate the wickedness of this, and also that of, if anyone is supporting it, it's time to stop. I had a conversation with, it was a man. It was a man considerably older than myself. And we were talking about this very thing. And he didn't like my argument. And he said, well, what does it matter? My wife and I can't have any more children anyway, so it doesn't matter at all what I believe. Well, yeah, it does, because you can teach it to others. You can teach wickedness to others. You can teach it to your grandkids. And they practice what is wrong. They practice what is clearly something despised by God. And don't think that this is some kind of new subject. It is not. It is discussed in the Old Testament. And it is talked about in the Old Testament. And it's talked about the wickedness of people, and particularly in Israel, of the things that they had been doing. And the killing of their children is there. It is there. This is not a sermon that's evangelistic, but it's moral. And understanding that we cannot support anything like this. Just going back to Romans chapter 1 again. Romans chapter 1, and how this chapter finishes off here. It says, verse 32, last verse in Romans chapter 1, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. I'm not an abortionist, nor can I ever have an abortion. But if I approve of it, it's wrong. Well, there's that man I was talking about. He approved of it, and he can teach it to others. Well, it's all wrong. To even approve of it, to support it in any way, it is wrong. Once again, will Christ forgive us? Yes. If Christ will give that message of forgiveness on the day of Pentecost, 50 days after He was crucified, to many who would have been there yelling, "Crucify Him." And Roman soldiers who had been responsible for scourging Him or for nailing Him to the cross, they were still in Jerusalem, no doubt they were still there. And to Saul of Tarsus, Acts chapter 9, he is given that message of mercy. If Christ will forgive them, He'll forgive us. But it's a matter of us taking that forgiveness. It's a matter of us doing His will. The words are for our learning. The words are to help us and to help everybody. The words, the entire world can be based off of the biblical text and do its absolute best that it could possibly do by learning from this. And let us learn. And let us become the people that we should be. We ask this morning, if you need to respond to the invitation, that you please come as we stand and sing.